And welcome back. So we're now at the last of the recordings. Today we're going to be looking at brand equity and what that means. And we'll be also posting some more information about this online afterwards as well. So let's get started. Things that we're going to be looking at generally today: how do consumers' characteristics influence our buying behavior? What major psychological processes influence consumer response to the marketing program? How do consumers make the purchasing decisions, and in what way do consumers make a deliberative, rational decision? And we'll probably have a look at how they don't in that case. If we're looking at particularly managing brands, obviously brands are hugely important, especially to us as consumers. We base a lot of our buying decisions purely on a particular brand. And if you think about what it actually means to us, why we stick with brands and why we like them so much, part of the attraction is trust factor. We understand what a particular brand means. And if we've used a brand, it develops in us an element of trust in the sense we know what to expect with the brand. So this is why, particularly if we're trying to develop a brand, it's making something that is identifiable to the consumer, that they understand immediately what it is. So therefore, once we have identify what it is we're trying to prove with our brand, then we have to actually work out how we're going to get that message across. So we plan, then we measure and interpret that plan once we've implemented it, and then we grow, and hopefully with the idea that our brand becomes memorable to the consumer. A brand is a name, a term, a sign, symbol or design, or a combination of all of those, intended to identify the goods or services of one seller or group of sellers and to differentiate them from those of the competitors. So if you think a particular thing of McDonald's is the golden arches is very good. So it's the color, the gold, and the actual shape of the arches identifies them very distinctly from their competitors, such as Burger King. The main benefits that we have as brands, if you think originally the idea, it would identify a specific source of the product or who made the product. And that in itself tells us a lot, because based on our experience of it. So originally the idea of a brand, if you actually understand what a brand was, when they would brand a cow, that would mean that cow had come from a particular farm. So a cow was actually branded to show that it came from a particular farm, and therefore would identify the original owner and the source of the animal. Now this, with us now, when we're dealing with brands in products, simplifies our decision making and hopefully reduces the risk of which I was talking about. If I give you an example, recently when I was in Istanbul, in Taksim Square in the center of Istanbul, I was not there for a holiday, so I wasn't there to enjoy myself and have a good time and try out new things, but I was hungry, I needed something to eat, and there were obviously many restaurants. And let's say that a particular brand over there would be Mustafa's restaurant, very popular name over there. The problem is I have no idea what Mustafa's restaurant food is, what their standard of food is, what their menu is, what their prices are, what their services are like. I have no idea. So it's very difficult for me to make a decision based on, am I going to enjoy the food there or not? I would have no idea. But sure enough, on the other corner, there was a McDonald's, the familiar arches, and we know automatically, most of us know what kind of food they sell in McDonald's. We know the quality of the food, we know the price of the food, we know what the service is like, we know most things of the brand. Therefore, there is zero risk almost of the possibility of us going in there and being surprised. And sure enough, I got a regular meal, as in most others, at a very cheap price. So there was zero risk. So it actually worked out. And so that those were the benefits to me. And the benefits to them is that they got my customer because I knew what their brand meant to me as a consumer. For the marketer, those of us that are selling the particular brand, what does it mean to us? Well, it can simplify the product handling. It can protect unique features, what things particularly mean to us. And obviously we can create loyalty with the brand. And it also helps establish barriers to entry. If we consider that it would be very easy to imitate McDonald's in the sense of producing another hamburger or something similar, restaurant of a similar kind of products, but the same thing, people don't know what to expect. So it's very difficult for another company to come in and get the level of loyalty, the level of knowledge, of awareness that a brand has created, partly because developing a brand and a brand identity takes a long time to get, maybe years or even decades. So it's not too easy to just copy that. We can copy ideas and simple things, and this is done all the time. And in some cases, they steal the ideas and maybe even copy things so similarly to try and confuse us. So if a particular brand will say Sony has a good reputation in electrical goods, then sure enough, people have tried to steal from that brand by making a product called Sony with using two N's to try and confuse us. But obviously it would be impossible for a company to be able to just copy Sony exactly and get their level of knowledge and awareness in the consumer. So this is the advantage of a brand. And obviously this is very beneficial because it also means that they can charge much more because of that, because of the lack of risk by the consumer. So a firm has a variety of benefits from branding. It can be a powerful means to secure a competitive advantage, so it can compete with us because purely on the basis of the brand. So sometimes marketers don't see the real importance of brand loyalty until they change a crucial element of the brand, which was one of the cases that we have spoken about before, which is that when they brought out the new Coke, immediately the brand loyalty was lost. They changed something and they immediately moved over to their competitors, Pepsi in this case. So branding effects are pervasive. In other words, they can go through many things. In one study, preschoolers felt identical McDonald's food items, even carrots, milk and apple juice, tasted better when wrapped in a McDonald's familiar packaging rather than an unmarked wrapper. So merely the thought of them assuming that it comes from the brand would automatically make it taste better than one that isn't because of the brand association. If it's made by a particular brand, it must be better or taste better. So it can be very psychological. It's very powerful. Now, the idea when we're talking about the scope of branding, we're talking about creating a difference so that if somebody buys our brand, that there is a reason for it. There is a notable difference than buying, let's say, the supermarket brand. What is the difference? So what we have to do is create a difference between the non-branded product and the branded one. If we consider that we could buy supermarket coffee and then we can buy a branded coffee, Nescafe for example, there has to be an actual difference that we can associate and produce and communicate to the consumer. Otherwise, what's the point? Why would we spend twice as much money on buying a branded product? So we have to be able to communicate a difference between the non-branded and the branded products to the consumer. Brand equity is the added value endowed on products and services because of the brand, the extra money that we charge because of that particular brand. In other words, not necessarily due to the particular attributes of the product. I'm sure if you look at say something like a handbag made by Chanel or Dolce & Gabbana, yes, of course, it has good quality in the manufacturing, but so do many other brands. And you could see a difference between something that doesn't have such a high level brand of equal quality or manufacturing quality with the same kind of uses in the product and the same size or approximate dimensions, whereby the Chanel would be 500 euros and the Chanel brand would be 3,000. So the brand equity is the difference between the two. In this case, 2,500 euros, the majority of the actual price of the product, purely because of the brand or the name that is associated with it. Now, when we're talking about customer-based brand equity, well, we have differences in our responses based upon certain things. So some of them are our knowledge of the particular brand, usually based on experience. But we also have perceptions and beliefs, things that we learn about or think about a particular product, which may not be based on anything actually tangible, certain things that we believe that they represent. So it's the differential effect brand knowledge has on a consumer response to the marketing of the brand. Now, it can be positive and negative. The three ingredients of customer-based brand equity are the brand equity arising from differences in the consumer response. The differences in response are a result of consumers' knowledge, In other words, what they actually experience, their thoughts, feelings, and beliefs of a particular brand, and reflected in perceptions, preferences, those related to the actual marketing of a brand. Now, if we look at why we buy a brand, effectively the brand is making us a promise. We buy a particular brand because of what we're expecting out of it, and the brands have a responsibility to that. In other words, by putting their name on something, they are promising us something. So it's what the brand must be or what it must do for consumers. So it's the marketer's vision of what the brand must be and do for consumers. So consumers will decide, based on what they think and feel about their brand, if they accept any of the marketing actions. Now, there's certain models to measure brand equity. So we'll be looking at some of the brand asset valuator, BAV, brand Z, and the brand resonance model. So I'll have a look at some of those. Now, the brand asset valuator model, this compares brand equity of thousands of different brands across hundreds of categories. But there are 4 components of brand equity according to them. So the first one, as we can see here, the energized differentiation. So the brand's point of difference, so it relates to margin and cultural currency. In other words, the strength of the actual brand. The other one, relevance. How appropriate is the brand to you? In other words, it relates to considerations and trial once you've tried the actual product. Then there's the brand stature. So it's an indicating of the overall operating value. So the esteem, how you regard the brand, is in high esteem or low esteem. So it relates to perceptions of quality and loyalty. And then knowledge. So it's an intimate understanding of the brand. So it relates to awareness and customer experience, having used the product and how we feel about it after having used it. In the universe of brand performance, if we compare sort of the stature, the esteem and knowledge, and compare that with the strength, the actual energized differentiation and relevance as a comparison, so we can see we have somewhere the new and unfocused ones. Well, these brands are not so well known because they're too new and they're not specifically focused in our minds. So we have some brands there that you can see. Then maybe if they're higher up on the strength, so these brands have relevance, but only to a small knowledge. In other words, they don't have the stature. Not as many people either esteem them or have knowledge of them. As that goes up, whereby they're not as strong, well, brands can be overcome with what people know about them. So they're in a position that with the eroding or declining one, that maybe they have to overcome, that maybe people have either a particular bad impression of them or we need to change people's perceptions of them. Now, the leadership is those that are obviously high in stature and high in strength. Well, they are the leaders of the brand. Why? Because customers find these brands irresistible, and they obviously have very high earnings and big margins. So it's very profitable to be in that particular sector. So we can see some of the particular brands that are very well known. Obviously, Microsoft and Nike and Apple are well up there. Now we're looking at the brand dynamics pyramid. For any brand, each person interviewed is assigned a level of the pyramid depending on their responses to a set of questions. The brand dynamic pyramid shows the number of consumers who have reached each level. So in other words, if we're starting at the very bottom, the presence, do they know about the product? Have they heard of it? The next level, relevance, does it offer me something that I need? So working the way up, maybe there are obviously going to be less people at each stage. Then the performance of the actual product. Is it considered that the product delivers that particular performance that they are expecting? So they start by knowing about it. Does it offer something I want? Can it deliver the performance I require? And then, does it offer something to me that is better than those of my competitors? And that is the advantage over and above their competitors in a similar market. And then finally, once we have bonded and we've got a particular brand bonding, then as far as we're concerned, nothing else beats it. So this shows obviously a very strong relationship of the brand to the consumer. So the brand resonate pyramid, if we look, it emphasizes the durability. So on the left side, we have the emotional root, the stages of brand development, and on the right side we have the objectivity. So as we see this, where we're working through each of the levels, we come higher up in each of these. So who are we? Do we have it's very deep and broad and overall, and slowly we start focusing on what it means to us in terms of the actual performance of the product, but also what it means to us in terms of imagery, especially with things like points of parity and difference. Where does it compare with our competitors, and in what way does it differ? It offers us similar particular benefits, but certain additional ones. Then as we go up with responsiveness, how do we feel about it? Our judgments, our personal feelings about it, and we become more positive and more accessible reactions to particular things of the brand. And then finally, with resonance, once the brand is resonating with us, well, building a relationship with the brand and therefore developing a more intense and active loyalty towards that particular brand. So the further up we go, the more dedicated we become to the brand. And these are the building blocks, if you like, of the brand. Starting out whereby, because it doesn't just apply to existing brands. This is how we would start out if we're trying to develop a new brand, that we want to get to the level of resonance, of getting intense active loyalty. But we can't expect that immediately. We have to go through these phases and start building up knowledge and giving the performance and the imagery that people are looking for them to develop some kind of feelings towards our brand. And this is the methodology of getting there. So building brand equity. Well, the three main brand equity drivers are initial choice of brand elements. So the brand name, the URL of the website, logo, symbols, characteristics, even the people that are speaking about it, our spokespeople, slogans, jingles, packages, and signage, all very important. The next, the marketing activities that we do, the product and service that all accompanying marketing activities and supporting programs. And then secondary associations, indirectly transferring the brand by linking it to some other entity, such as a person, a place, or a thing. So if we think, I suppose a good example of that would be, that came out recent with the Avengers movies, what car does Iron Man drive? Well, Iron Man drives an Audi. James Bond, an Aston Martin. So automatically there is an element there. If we look at spokespeople in the brand elements, well, with Nespresso, who is it? George Clooney. So certain people are associated with it, and it's very important because it helps build up a particular a driver for us of what makes it interesting to the consumer, that we associate with these things that may not necessarily be specific to the brand itself. After all, James Bond or Iron Man are merely fictitious figures, but it gives us an idea of what kind of style that we want to be associated with. So as we see the brand elements that we've already mentioned, so they're devices that can be trademarked. So we know the famous golden arches here. So most brands employ multiple brand elements. So Nike, they have the little tick, and also the Just Do It slogan. And Nike is the name of the Greek winged goddess of victory. So all of these things combine to make up a more complete package for the actual brand and what the brand means to people. The brand builders, well, when we're building a brand, we have to make something that is memorable. It's got to be something that we can remember. As soon as we see the particular golden arches, we immediately can remember what it's talking about. Or some of the other ones. I'm sure if we now see George Clooney, we'll probably immediately think of Nespresso. So it has to be meaningful and likable. And then on the defensive side, well, these things have to be able to be transferred across other products. So they've got to have an element of sort of transferability or adaptability to actually be able to adapt to other products within the line that we're marketing. So development, if we're actually in the case of actually trying to develop new brands, we've got to have something that is easy to recall for these things. In other words, whatever it is, it's got to be something that is easy to remember, so that we know when we see that particular thing, we automatically go to the brand. If something is very complicated and it's not too clear, then we're not necessarily going to be able to remember it or associate that particular item or element with the brand. So easy to recall, descriptive, and obviously persuasive. It has to persuade us in a nice way that that is a good thing to be able to make us more interested in the brand. which is why if we were to say that with Nespresso, they were looking at, let's say, slightly older women of a certain age, let's say over 35, well, the person that they picked was considered persuasive because they picked one of Hollywood's sort of hottest, slightly older actors, because I think he was probably nearly 50 at least before he started those adverts, and therefore very influential to the kind of market that they were aiming for. Right, if we're talking about holistic marketing activities, we've seen these in general. So where we're talking about the whole universe, interactions with the company, word of mouth, the things that we actually see, these are the things that we have to be looking at. And with brands, with secondary associations, if we assume that the kind of things that we're producing, there are automatically associations. If we were to look at watches, automatically there's a geographical association. Best watches are made in Switzerland. Maybe it would be a connection with other brands. Maybe it's particular characters. If we did the McDonald's, it's Ronald McDonald's. Spokespeople, we've already mentioned. Sporting events, Red Bull automatically associated with extreme sports or Formula One. So these secondary associations help us build up an image and a backdrop of the brand that is very important for us to be able to multiply our awareness of people within the world outside of our company. Now, secondary source of brand knowledge, where we get our knowledge from, obviously we get it from people and places, but we also get it from particular things and also from other brands. So there's a whole mass of influences of where we get the knowledge about a particular brand from. If we think about the people, then obviously we get it from maybe people who have endorsed the brand or the employees of the company. But places, maybe what particular country it comes from or what particular channels it moves through within those countries. The things, either particular events or maybe causes that they're behind, they will help us remember the brand. And then other brands, maybe they have an alliance with another company. If we think of maybe a washing powder, it will automatically come, oh, a Hot Point, the manufacturer of a washing machine, or maybe the ingredients that something has something special, the actual company itself, or the extension of other things that they also sell. Sometimes it can work, obviously, sometimes it can't. We actually mentioned this before in the sense that like Virgin comes with so many other things that are associated with it. But if we're talking about extensions of going to another type of product that maybe we're not used to, it can actually be a negative effect on the brand. When we were talking about Colgate producing food, it doesn't have an augmenting ability to the brand. It's actually distracting from it. Right, internal branding, in other words, the promise that we make has to be effectively fulfilled by the employees of the company and the partners. So marketers must sort of walk the walk to deliver the promise. So they must adapt an internal perspective. In other words, to make sure employees and the marketing partners actually understand the basic branding of what they're trying to do with the brand. Now, a good example where this obviously came tumbling down, and again previously mentioned, was the scandal that was caused by an employee in McDonald's taking a picture of his booted feet standing in two salad bowls. Now, this is an employee. Now, there's obviously, he's not part of the marketing, but it still can very easily hurt the brand, and very severely, that he took a picture of him standing in the salad bowls, and then not only that, but posted it on Instagram, and it went viral. And in other words, they've got to be on board. Employees have to be on board and understand this, of how easy it is for them to damage the brand. And obviously it resulted in him being fired and a great loss to the brand as a whole, which then had to be recouped. Now, some brands actually have their own communities. Good example here, we have the HOG, the Harley Davidson Owners Group. So obviously these are people who have a very strong connection with the brand. The brand means a lot more to them than just merely passing necessity to buying a product. So they've got a strong connection. There's certain shared stories and rituals about how they would use or interact with the products. Maybe all the secondary associations that go with it, with the groups of the bikers, etc. And there is a certain responsibility to the community of the brand. Right, so how do we actually measure the brand equity? Well, we do what's called a brand audit. So let's have a start a look at how we work out how much a brand is worth. Now, branding obviously goes through different stages. We look at the value chain, where we start the marketing program. Now, initially, there's going to be some investment here, obviously, with the product, communications, trade, employee, etc. Now, through this, maybe we can use some multipliers as it gets into the customer mindset. In other words, we're trying to create awareness, trying to create associations and attitudes within the consumer. How do we do that? Well, with certain multipliers where we make sure the thing is very clear, our messages are clear, they're relevant, they're distinctive, they're separate from our competitors, and they're very clear and consistent. Then from the customer mindset, the next is the performance of the brand. Maybe because we're charging more money that with price premiums or the particular market share that we're after, and then we're hoping to expand, etc. How do we multiply that? Well, competitive reactions, the support from the channel, the size of the customers or the profile. So again, increasing brand performance through these multipliers. Then getting finally over to the shareholder value. So for the shareholder, it's the stock price, price to earnings ratio, and the capitalization that's important. The multipliers for that being the market dynamics or the potential of growth, the risk profile of the company, and the contribution of the brand itself. This will further enhance that value to the shareholder. So it's a structured approach to assessing the sources and outcomes of brand equity and the way marketing activities create the value. So first, the firm targets actual or potential customers by investing in a market program to develop the brand. Next, assume the customer's mindset, buying behavior, and response to price will change as a result of the marketing program. The more marketing you do, the change, hopefully for the better, that you will be able to produce. So the question is how? That's the difficult part. So finally, the investment community will consider market performance, replacement cost, purchase price, and acquisition, amongst other factors, to assess the shareholder value and the value of the brand in particular. So we've seen the three multipliers. So the program multiplier determines the marketing program's ability to affect the customer mindset. The customer multiplier determines the extent to which the value created in the mind affects the performance, and the market multiplier determines the extent to which the value of the brand affects the market performance. If we're looking at, say, the top valued brands, this is from the difference you note from 2017 and 2016. So these are the most valuable brands on the planet. And as you can see with most of these, Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Samsung, Verizon, Facebook, for example, are effectively technological products or online products. Some of the others, AT&T, Facebook, again, the International Commerce Bank of China, more conventional kinds of companies. So you can see how the technological products are very high up based on their brand value. And we can see certainly that in Google's case, it was number 2 in 2016 and is now number 1, whereas Apple used to be number 1 and is now number 2. Right, using the interbrand valuation, another form of working out the brand price or the value, the interbrand valuation model estimates the dollar value of a brand. So it defines value as the net present value of the future earnings, those earnings to be done in the future, that can be attributed to the brand alone. In other words, only as an extension of those sales because of the brand, rather than the actual products or use of those to the consumer. So the firm believes marketing, financial analysis are equally important in determining the value of a brand. Its process follows these particular steps that we can see here. Now we have the financial analysis of the intangible earnings, in other words, not derived by actual products. The demand drivers, why people are buying them in the first place. Competitive benchmarking compared to the competitors, obviously, and the strength of the brand. So how do we manage brand equity? Well, brand revitalization. Understand that the sources of brand equity were in the first place Are positive associations maybe losing their strengths or uniqueness? Because obviously there's always going to be competition that's coming up, and you're basing most of maybe the loyalty of the purchases or repurchases on your particular brand. So have negative association become linked to the brand? If we look at an example of Red Bull, who obviously have a lot of different competitors, maybe one of the problems, a negative association, is the health issues of people over a certain age drinking Red Bull and having heart attacks. So decide whether to retain the same positioning of that particular kind of product or create a new one, and if so, which one? Now, brand reinforcement is consistently conveying the brand's meaning in terms of what product it represents, what core benefits it supplies, and what needs it satisfies, and how the brand makes the product superior, and which strong, favorable, and unique brand association should exist in consumers' minds. So the brand strategy, we would develop new brand elements or apply existing ones, combine new and existing elements. So a branding strategy, a parent brand, we might decide to use the same brand across either line extensions or category extensions. So individual brand names, so if we have, for example, General Mills, which is the overall one, Biscuit, Gold Medal, Wheaties, Yoplait, for example. Company brands, GE, Heinz, Campbell's Soup, again, across the whole range. And then sub-brands, Kellogg's have Rice Krispies and Frosted Flakes, but they're still part of Kellogg's, so we understand that. So brand portfolio is the set of all the brands and brand lines in a particular firm offers for sale in a particular category or market segment. So we can see here at the brand portfolio of Sony of all the different kinds of products they have in each of the product ranges. So the role of the brands, well, certainly it creates more money for high-end prestige products and also for low-end entry-level ones to distinguish between the two, and provides us with those famous cash cows. People keep buying our products because of the brand that's behind it. And brand extensions improve the odds of new product success by using the strength of the brand to help us bring new products to market. So 80 to 90% of all new brands introduced are line extensions. So one reason it's less expensive to introduce a line extension than to launch a new brand. They're already familiar with the brand name. So the advantage are improved odds of a new product success and positive feedbacks. The disadvantage, product dilution. There's too many for people to understand. We tend to maybe lose strength on a particular one. And this may lead to confusion for the consumer. And cannibalization. If there's too many brands for the same kind of product, people will find themselves actually competing against themselves and buying one over another, and thereby actually effectively eating up the same number of clients for the one particular brand and losing clients for the other. So some of the challenges and opportunities that we have now, obviously customers are becoming more savvy and intelligent, so they understand this, but also brand proliferation, so they're becoming too many. You only have to look at breakfast cereals in the supermarket. Fragmentation of media, how we can publicize these things. Obviously increased competition, increased costs, and greater accountability for what was expected by the brand to the consumer. So we now have some general ideas about brand management. So it's the strategic brand management, the design and implementation of marketing programs to build, measure, and manage the brand equity of the 4 steps here. So identifying, establishing the brand position and value, planning and implementing the brand marketing programs, measuring and interpreting the brand performance, and then growing and sustaining the brand equity. So some of the key processes we have here. So you can quite easily see these. So identify and establish the brand. So the key concepts, frame of reference, points of parity, etc. The brand mantra. The plan of implementing, so the mixing and matching of brand elements, etc. The brand value chain, and then grow and sustain the equity, the brand product matrix, etc. And that is all we have on increasing our brand equity for the moment. So thank you. That's the last of our recordings. So these will be posted and I'll be asking you some questions about those very shortly. Thank you very much.